This is Pukeology Podcast, where science meets your hilarious puke stories and the tips and tricks to stop that up-chuckle that you need.
You never know what's going to spew out of her mouth. Here's
my mama,
Dr. Pukeology.
A baby's stage in utero seems to be all jumbled together, but as a doctor, I just can't let you think that. Pregnant mommies, I'm going to walk you through the beautiful journey of your baby's development in today's Pregnancy Pukeology Podcast, episode 74. When does an embryo become a fetus? Do you want no more morning sickness, pregnancy nausea, or how about no more headaches or migraines? Visit our sponsor, nomonausea.com, the only natural way to instantly stop your worst nausea, vomiting, or headaches now, and get 25% off with the code PUKE25. That's PUKE 25, or just place it on your baby registry. That's right, a no more nausea ban. You can get it on your baby registry at Bye Bye Baby, or get it shipped for free in just 2 days on Amazon as a Prime vendor. Where that's the same place you can find them for little ones too, like No More Nausea Kids and No More Sleepless Nights Kids. By the way, the sleep one works phenomenal on moms with small wrists too. Now available at your local Walmart stores. Do you want pregnancy humor that makes you want to pee your pants? Like you don't have to pee all the time, with hilarious stories like Jelly Gave Up My Jelly, Goop Poop, and Emo Mom. If you want to learn more about your pregnancy, humor and knowledge is key to help you survive these 9 months together. That's right, we're in this together. Today, you will learn the science behind the journey your baby takes from fertilization to an embryo, and then to a fetus. And finally, to discuss what every pregnant mom wants to know. Is my baby viable, or can they live outside of the womb if I deliver right now? All of this coming up and more in today's Pregnancy Pukeology Podcast, episode 74. When does a baby, an embryo, become a fetus? The Science of Pukeology. Baby stages that are in the womb, you recognize them as growth. Well, baby's growth always starts in utero, and that happens from fertilization, which is the point of birth where the female ovum, also known as the egg, combines with the male sperm. Fertilization happens. This is the first stage in utero, which is considered a zygote. No, I'm not calling you a silly animal. That's actually what it's called. So you have to remember that all happens when you've already had you've already fertilized the actual egg itself. Now, whether or not it's going to stick is the question. Fertilization occurs inside of the fallopian tube. This followed by the movement of the zygote to the uterus for implantation. So again, the egg itself moves from the fallopian tubes, which obviously you don't want it to grow there because then you'd end up getting what's called a tubal pregnancy, and that could potentially be an emergency surgery if the baby grows big enough, because you need to make sure that the baby is able to grow in an environment that it needs, which is the uterus. So it drops from the actual fallopian tube to the uterus itself for implantation. Now the zygote undergoes multiple different divisions which form blastomeres. At this stage, which is considered 16 to 32, that forms what we call a morula. This development is a fluid-like filled cavity that forms a blastocyte. So again, you just implanted, which again, during the actual trimesters, quote unquote, you would be considered obviously in your first because you don't even know that this has happened yet. So it keeps dividing and dividing and dividing. And again, that zygote undergoes multiple divisions, which is called the blastomere. And then each of those blastomeres forms the morula, which is 16 to 32. Again, that's how many times over. Think of it like, 2 to the second power, then 2 to the third power, then to the fourth, and things like that. An embryo is the stage that lasts from week 3 to week 8. And in this stage, it marks the major stage of organ development in a developing child. Did you know that the heart, lungs, brain, and spinal cord have already started developing at week 5? And listen, you just found out that you were pregnant because you had a missed period literally in week 4. Now, in week 6 and 7, the eyes and ears begin to form, and arms and leg little buds are also visible. Isn't that incredible? So you also have to remember that what we call organogenesis. So after 8 weeks, the baby enters a stage that is considered a fetal stage, which lasts until birth. So when does an embryo become a fetus? Well, that's what we're talking about right now. Anything after that 8-week period of time where the baby has all of the major organs already forming. Now, ladies, don't feel bad. I also want to throw this out there. I myself is a mother of 2, and I remember not knowing I was pregnant until almost the 3rd to 4th month. So if you did anything that you weren't supposed to, don't beat yourself up. All I can say is, trust me, the baby's okay because of the fact that it's something that wasn't happening all the time. So I just want to throw that out there because trust me, mom guilt is real, and I felt the exact same way once I found out. So now we're in what we call organogenesis. Okay, Genesis means the formation or development of the organs. Okay, we already said that the beginning stages start to form week 5, 6, and 7, but in organogenesis, this is where the organs really actually take shape, meaning they start to function the way that they're supposed to. The developing fetus requires full development of different organs to ensure all of the body systems work properly. Embryonic period always serves the purpose of organogenesis, and this is the time the baby is between 3 weeks to 8 weeks or so, continuing all the way up to the 12th week. Now, the cardiovascular system, which means the heart and the different blood vessels, the development starts around the 3rd week with primordial heart development. This continues to the septum formation, which means the base of the heart. It's like when you draw a little heart and you have the 2 humps on the upper part. Well, the base is actually the septum where it comes down to a point. And this happens about the 7th week. Now, right around the 10th to 12th week, a fetal heartbeat can actually be felt using ultrasound method called the Doppler. And if you want to know more information about it, I just did a podcast, okay? It's called When Can You Hear Your Baby's Heart Rate? Well, guess what? I just answered it for you. During the 10th to 12th week is when you can actually hear the baby on Doppler. Now, the respiratory and digestive system starts as a one tube, okay? So initially around the 3rd week and later divides to form the respiratory tract and the digestive tract separately. By 24 weeks, the lung has surfactant, which surfactant is a very fancy word for it's the coating of these structures that are like balloons, okay? They're called bronchioles and alveoli, and that's what does the gas exchange. Now, what's easier, to push a car that's from stop or to push a car that's already in motion? Well, if you've ever had to push a car, you know that pushing a car in motion, and that's what surfactant does. If you have a big balloon, okay, is it easier to blow up a balloon the first time or blow it up the second time? Well, it's easier to blow it up the second time. So what surfactant does is it kind of like loosens everything up, and it's like a water-like substance that prohibits those balloon structures from completely compressing all the way down, so that when the baby has to breathe for the very first time, it allows the baby to make sure that it doesn't close all the way, so that it has to open all the way back up. And surfactant is actually something that when these babies, if they're considered premature at 24 weeks, they will give them steroids. And steroids will actually help the baby to start to develop the surfactant much faster than it would if it just normally was about to carry out the regular gestation age. All right, now onto the nervous system. If you can't tell, I absolutely love the human body. I find it so amazing. Yes, I am a doctor, but again, I still marvel at every single organ group and every single organ system. Now, the nervous system forms from what we call the neural plate, which again later forms the neural tube, which is responsible for forming both the brain and the spinal cord. So it is super, super, super important that you ladies are taking prenatal vitamins, okay? And again, a lot of the neural tube deformities or problems happen because moms don't get enough folic acid. So folic acid is a B vitamin. It's something that will actually help to prevent neural tube deformities. And neural tube deformities are things like spinal bifida, other issues with the actual brain and your baby being able to function normally outside of the womb. Okay. Now the peripheral nervous system, I should say, develops from the neural plate, which has the cranial and the caudal portion. Again, the head, and the caudal means like the tail of it. Different glands of the child are then formed during these embryonic periods. These glands include the liver, the thyroid, and the parathyroid glands, and the formation of the bones and other musculoskeletal system start by week 12 and continue even after birth. So if you're a mommy like me that used to work inside the operating room, I made sure that I wore 2 pieces of lead, meaning whenever I was inside where I would do orthopedic surgery, they have a lot of x-ray. So if you know that the baby's bones and their muscle groups are forming during these 8 to 12 weeks, you definitely want to make sure that you always are protecting not just the baby, but also yourself and your thyroid, because of the fact that we don't want any type of problems with the ossification or the bone hardening of the baby itself. So this includes ossification of the bones at 12 weeks. Now, the end of the embryonic period results in organs having been formed, and most of these organs are in pre-primordial stage of development and continues all the way through the fetal period and ensures that the organs are mature and fully developed. I also want to throw out there that the fingers and toes have actually separated at 12 weeks. Isn't that interesting? But by the 10th and 11th week, the head is about half of the total body length of the baby. So that's why they look like little bobbleheads. Well, it continues the exact same way. The head, which is the most important, it carries your brain and then your spinal column. That is what holds the majority of nerve endings. And so it wants to protect it. So it's going to get largest first, and then the body will then fill out later. Starting in the 13th week, the facial nerves are actually very clear. Okay, so let's go to the second stage because I'm just super curious and I can't wait to tell you about it. All right, now I always want to say that you need to make sure that you're eating lots of protein-rich foods to help the baby grow, as well as you want DHA and EPA, which are different omega fatty acids, okay? If you're curious to see what the heck you should be eating, I hate that I named it a pregnancy diet, but I did, because of the fact that you really should be taking a look at what items should you be eating. So go run over to episode 16. It's called What You Should Be Eating in Pregnancy, and you'll find out all of the amazing things that you can eat and why you should eat them. All right, going over to the second trimester. In 14 weeks, the external genitalia, which means it becomes a male or a female at that point in time. Now, the fetus may suck his or her thumb at week 15, and you can start to feel the baby's movement again at 16 weeks. So ladies, a lot of times it's hard to tell, like, hey, is that my baby? Or do I just have gas? Well, it is your baby at 16 weeks or older. 17 weeks, the body fat starts to grow. At 18 weeks, the rate of growth starts to slow down a little bit. You'll also see that the vernix, which is kind of like the protective coating that appears on the baby's skin, that actually forms at week 19. And then the baby at week 20 actually has a sleep and awake cycle. So don't be surprised if you work night shift and you're up during the night. your baby will be up during the night whenever he or she is born. Vice versa, if you set a sleep pattern for yourself, the baby too will actually have a sleep pattern right around week 20. Now, at 21, the baby learns to swallow. The fingernails and the toenails are totally visible, and eyelids and eyebrows even are more developed at week 22 and 23. Isn't that incredible? So when we take a look at the end of the second trimester, we're about 24. And at this point in time, remember that everything is growing and everything is changing. All of those were gaining about 2 pounds here in about week 25. And then you get into what we call the third trimester. Now, the third trimester lasts from 28 weeks to 40. So at 28 weeks, the baby's brain rapidly develops. At 29, the amniotic fluid reaches about 1 liter. Isn't that crazy? And then from 30 to 32 weeks, the baby can respond to light. And again, body hair starts to begin to disappear. So your baby literally is like a little woogie or a Wookie, right? So the baby hair is actually formed all over the baby, and then it starts to disappear while it's in the womb so that the baby doesn't come out like that. Now, at 33, the bones continue to harden and the skull remains very soft and pliable, all ready for labor. That's the reason why we actually have in the brain, we call them soft spots, because the baby's head would never be able to fit through the vaginal canal or it would be damaged, right? So it needs to be pliable, and that's the reason why some babies come out looking like little cone heads, but it needs to be able to work for its circumstance. And we got to get through the birthing canal. That's the most important. Body fat increases a lot at 34 weeks. 35 weeks, the lungs are approaching maturity. 36, most babies have shifted head down. Now, if they didn't, that's called frank breech and could potentially be a reason why you're having a C-section. At 37, a baby is born, can be, again, at 36, or at the end of 36, it's considered a full-term pregnancy or full-term birth, okay? Between 36 to 40, you have to remember that that's considered full term, so the baby can be born at any point in time, and 40 weeks is what we consider the estimated due date. Remember that the baby's brain continues to develop, and it develops at great deals from 36 to 40. So it is what's developing the most. That's the reason why we say keep them shaking bacon, right? So we want to keep them in utero as long as possible, just so that they develop perfectly exactly the way that you want it. All right. Now, I know that was a lot. I felt like I was talking out of a textbook, but I wasn't. I am very passionate about organogenesis and about the babies. So let's get to some funny stories so that you guys can laugh, so you can deal with the tips and tricks that I have to deal with later.
Throwing up on a Tuesday? One puke story.
I'm 8 weeks pregnant at the time and had my favorite morning sickness remedy, butter toast with strawberry jelly, before my ultrasound. I was so excited to see my baby for the first time. I made sure to have a full bladder, and man, I had to pee. I asked my husband to hurry to the OB office faster because I really had to pee. They had to lay me on a cold table, and the sonographer jelly was on high heat. The second it hit my abdomen, it felt so warm that I couldn't help it. I let a little pee out. Now, after I felt it drip down my leg, I started puking my breakfast because I was so grossed out. I wasn't ready for all that jelly. That's so funny. Destiny, LIT. What a great story. I definitely have to say that was a really good segue. I was super gassy my whole first trimester, and the smell of even my own farts made me nauseous. Every time I used the bathroom in the morning, I had to keep a trash can so both ways were protected. I went for my first OB appointment, and it was the ultrasound time. The sonographer took and shook the bottle of goop, and it made the loudest fart noise. I immediately got sick all over my stomach. The sonographer jumped out of the way, and I couldn't tell that I didn't want to do the exam after what she just witnessed. Thanks, Jackie of 2, for that hilarious puke story. Now, I went to find out what my baby was going to be, and it was my husband, my mom, my stepdad, and my aunts were all there. We were all so excited. Now they knew I was a ball of emotions. I would cry, so I had to have a Kleenex right at hand. Yes, I did cry at Kleenex commercials, but all of a sudden I was crying and my nose started running, which led to postnasal drip and the nausea and vomiting. We first heard the heartbeat, which started the waterworks. And before I saw anything else in 4D image, my baby looked like baby Skeletor, all the bones, and I thought something was wrong. So I started crying even louder and everyone tried to console me. The vomit snot came next. Let's just say no one but my husband came with me for our next gender reveal. Thanks, Christy, Mom. Now, do you have a hilarious puke story? Of course you do. Everyone has a funny puke story that they just want to send it. So send it to me, Pukeology, Pukeology, at nomonausea.com. That's NOMONAUSEA.com. Or tweet me at Pukeology so we can all have a good laugh. Tips and tricks to stop the up-chuckle that you need. Now, the fetal development stages and the timeline of the fetal development is kind of what we broke down into what we call trimesters. And the reason why we call it in trimesters is because we're able to section it, kind of like nice little bits or chunks, I should say. So we know that the first trimester happens from week 1 to week 13. The second trimester is week 14 to 27. And third trimester is 28 to 40. Now, the fetal period lasts from 8 weeks up to term. So we said 8 weeks is that start and stop, I guess you could say, of when your embryo becomes a fetus. Now remember, by the end of the embryonic period, organogenesis is complete, and the fetus is about 2.5 centimeters in dimension. And by that time, all of the major organs have actually been formed. Crazy, right? The fetal period is marked by the development of the fetus both in the organs, and this is shown by an increase in length and weight. The organs also develop into a more complex and functional system. By 12th week of gestation, the baby starts moving, and the expected weight, now mommies, you can feel the baby moving at about 16 weeks is what we said. And you can expect the weight is about 45 grams, and the fetus is about 8 centimeters in length. At this time, the kidneys have started producing, or functioning, I should say, to make urine. Yes, moms, we have been a filtration system of urine since the very beginning, because when they're able to pee, it goes all the way inside of us and we literally cleanse it out and take it to our excretory system until the baby comes out. By the 20th week, there are spontaneous fetal movements. The baby is continuing to grow at a weight of 225 grams and at a length of about 25 centimeters. So, if you're ever curious on how the heck to get your baby to move, remember, we talked about when the baby actually starts to be able to see different parts of light and has fine motor movements, okay? That is week 30 to 31. Now, if you want to find out if you have a frank breeched or just a breeched baby, meaning the feet are down and not the head like it's supposed to be, go over and listen to episode 72, How to Get Your Baby to Move. Now, we're utilizing different tricks and techniques and things like that to help your baby move naturally, okay? Now you're probably wondering, once again, when is my baby viable? Okay, this is very important because as having pregnant patients, a lot of women sometimes are affected with preeclampsia, sometimes eclampsia, unfortunately, if it was not diagnosed ahead of time. Now, what preeclampsia and eclampsia are is super high blood pressure, all caused by the baby. Okay, it doesn't mean that you have high blood pressure before you got pregnant. It means that the baby is actually causing these blood pressure problems to happen, which is very unusual because during pregnancy, your blood pressure is actually going to decrease. Okay. You'll also find that in pregnancy, your heart rate naturally increases a little bit. So they work as the yin and the yang. But in preeclampsia, and if you're wondering more information about preeclampsia, how to treat it and or how to see if you have it, episode 70 is what you can go to. It's called What Causes Preeclampsia. Now, if that's the case, some babies have to be delivered in order to save the mom because the blood pressure is just way too high and the risk of seizures and decreased fetal oxygen for long periods of time can happen, and we never want to have a baby with a stillbirth. So if the baby is viable, meaning 24 weeks or older, it may differ depending upon your OBGYN. There are feelings of how high your blood pressure is or other complications that could potentially be going through, and the country that you live in. When I say that in regards to the level of medical expertise and equipments that can actually keep a baby viable. Now, the baby continues to grow such that by term is considered 40 weeks, but you're considered to have an at-term baby or an at-term birth anywhere between 36 to 40. Now, the weight is about 3 kilos and the baby's length is about 48 to 52 centimeters. At this point, the baby is ready and they're considered ready to go at term. Thank you all so much for joining me in this incredible journey, right? From fertilization to an embryo to a fetus and everything from here to there and all you've learned in the growing baby's gestational age. Now you know the science behind all of your babies, when everything is formed, organogenesis, fertilization, embryo, as well as fetus. And now you know that the baby is considered viable after 24 weeks. Thanks again. If you've loved me and everything that I've said, keep it going, guys. Give me 5-star rates or hearts for likes. And don't forget to download this episode, but more importantly, share it with all your Prego friends. Thanks again for listening to episode 74. When does your embryo become a fetus? See you guys next time. Pukeology Podcast, edutainment at its finest.